Hi guys, and welcome to Cultnomics. My name is Paul Hanley, and today I'm going to be chatting to you about the demand and supply model of exchange rates. In this video, we will explain the demand and supply model of exchange rates. We are going to start over here on the left hand side with the demand for euro, and the demand for euro is a downward sloping demand curve. So we have downward sloping like this. We will label that the demand represented by D, and in this case this is the demand for the euro currency. So demand for euro is downward sloping. We will start with a point on the graph which we will say is €1 yields us $1. So the exchange rate is €1 to $1 initially, and at that point A, what we have is a quantity of euros out there on the market, and we'll say that the quantity is 100 million. Okay, so 100 M here. Now, if we're to read this graph, what we tend to see is if there's an appreciation of a currency, and this means that the currency strengthens in value, what we would tend to see is that the €1, and we still read it as €1, the €1 in this case would gain us in terms of being traded $1 and maybe 10 cents. So that would represent an appreciation of the euro, where €1 now gets $1.10, in which case we move to point B on our graph. And at point B, what we see is the demand for euro is less. So we'll put that down at 80 million. So why is the demand less for euro following an appreciation, an increase in its value? Well, this is linked into the idea of exports, and exports are a receipt of foreign currency and the demand for euro. So what is happening in this case is, as the currency appreciates or gains in value, the goods that are being exported from the euro area are more expensive. And when they're more expensive, this means that people from outside of the euro area, the US in this case, are buying less of them. And if they're buying less of them, they need to demand less euros. So an appreciation leads to a loss of competitiveness, a reduction in exports, and therefore a decrease in the quantity of euros demanded. We can also look at the opposite of this, where there is a depreciation, and following a depreciation, let's say the euro is now worth only 90 cents in terms of dollars. In this case, what will happen is we will move to point C on the graph, which is an increase in demand for euros, and again we can relate it into exports. So what this means is when the euro decreases, the euro area gains a competitive advantage, exports are cheaper, and hence the demand for exports and for euros to buy these exports increases. So we see a depreciation leads to an increase in the demand for euros. Okay, the next one we'll look at now is the supply of euro. And the supply of euro is an upward sloping line as denoted here, and we will say that this is the supply of euros out on the market. So supply of euro, it is upward sloping. So to explain it, we'll start just like we have before, starting point where €1 gains us or trades for $1 on foreign currency markets. We'll call this point A, and we'll also say that that represents 100 million in terms of supply of euros. Now, at this point here, we have equilibrium along the supply curve. If the currency were to appreciate, to increase in value, now a euro would gain you, for example, $1.10 as before. The impact here in terms of the supply of euro is that the supply, denoted by point B, increases. So it increases in terms of supply. Why is this the case? Well, if we want to explain it, we have to refer to imports, and an appreciation of the currency means that everything that's imported into the euro area is cheaper, and because we are now going to import more because it's cheaper, we need to supply more euros on the market to demand the other currency. Maybe we're buying from America, hence we supply euros onto the market and we trade them for more dollars. So there's an increase in supply. If there's a depreciation of the currency, that would mean in our case that a euro is now worth less. So we will say it is worth 90 cents in terms of dollars. In this case, the supply of euros decreases, we'll say down to 80 million. And again, the reason is in terms of imports. Because of the depreciation, all imports are now more expensive. And because they're more expensive, we buy less of them. Hence, we need to supply less euros on the market to demand other currencies such as dollars. So we're not buying as many American goods. If we're not supplying as many euros, the supply is going to decrease to point C on the graph. Okay, so we have a demand curve now, which we know is downward sloping in terms of euro exchange rate. We have an upward sloping supply curve for euro, and we know now why that's the case. We will just note these in here as the demand curve for euro and the supply curve of euro. The equilibrium point in the demand and supply model is the intersection point of supply and demand, and at this point we derive the equilibrium exchange rate, which is, in our case, we'll just take the example, €1 gives us $1. And at that point there will be a equilibrium quantity of euros on the market. We'll call that 100 million as before, and this will be the going rate or the equilibrium rate as determined by supply and demand for this model here. I hope you call back to Cultnomics soon. Bye for now.